also, the antithesis of liking the Beatles was my dad, who did not like the Beatles, and that was hippie music. And that whole diatribe about, how, you want to hear good music, here, listen to Bing Crosby, that kind of dialogue that went on. And he wasn't wrong about Bing Crosby, but Bing Crosby wasn't the Beatles. And he wasn't the Beatles in 1969 and 1970 and 1971 when I was growing up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Celesting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, but today we're kind of steering away from Bruce land, and we're talking Beatles land, specifically Strawberry Fields Forever, maybe? Joining me tonight is returning guest. You guys just heard his episode just a few days ago. And I've got Doc back. Doc, welcome back to the show.
Jesse, how are you, pal? It's nice to be back. Always good to be with you.
It is really good to talk. We before we hit record, we're recording this on December 1st, and Doc and I shared our mutual frustration with our specific teams. The Eagles and the Cowboys are not doing well this season, and so we just shared our misery together.
Ugliness.
Yes, ugliness. Just in case someone hasn't listened to the episode where you kind of shared your Bruce story, tell my guests a little bit about yourself, Doc.
Yeah, I'm regular Doc. I live in Jersey, just outside the Philadelphia area where I grew up at, in Southwest Philly, and I work as a stagehand. I'm a union stagehand in the city of Philadelphia, local 8 member, and I work in the entertainment business in the back part, and so that brings that's my social life and. My work life included, and
yeah.
So other than that, I got a great daughter who's 27 years old and out in the corporate world and doing the best she can out there, doing quite well.
Well, good.
Yeah.
And so I know we talked about this, to pull the curtain back a little bit. When Doc and I talked before, Eddie. This was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I record a lot of episodes in advance. And so I just thought before we get over to our John Lennon discussion, are you still doing okay during this pandemic?
Yeah, the COVID era, I'm fortunate. I don't have any little ones and that need a great deal of attention. I feel bad for the families that have to do the school and figure out how to run their lives and their work lives and all that. I am situated pretty well, so I am okay. I do know people that have come down with the virus, and a few union members and a few close family members through my daughter, my ex-wife. Her current husband is in a hospital right now. So, but it's been tough times for everybody around, and the work situation is a bit tenuous, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, please stay safe. I hope things turn around, and soon you'll be backstage at an E Street Band show, and them playing Letter to You songs, right? We need that. So Doc and I were exchanging a few tweets, and it was brought up that December 8th, 1980, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of John Lennon's death. And, I got to thinking, maybe it'd be nice to do a couple episodes and kind of talk about John and the Beatles. I've never done a full Beatles episode here on Set Lusting Bruce. So I reached out and Doc said, hey, I'd love to spend a few minutes joining you. So let's start out with you and I are similar age. So growing up, talk about your experience, discovering the Beatles and talk about your fandom with that.
In the household, in the row home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I was the baby in my family, the youngest. And so my brother Joe's 12 years older than me. My brother Frank was 10 years older than me. My sister's 8 years older than me. So by the time I come along, they are getting into music, at the ages they are. And as I'm growing up, so I'm getting hit with Elvis. I'm getting hit with Sinatra from my parents. Well, from one of my parents.
Yeah.
I'm getting hit with Bing Crosby. And I'm getting hit with the Beatles. And they're the first groups that I really remember well. Sam Cooke also, I remember as part of my early ear listening experience. And but the Beatles were big. I mean, when I think about music, the whole big world of music, the Beatles are right there in the forefront of everything. And it was that way from the beginning. Me and my sister used to, go stand back to back and sing "Hey Jude" and things like that in front of the family. The Beatles were big. They were big in my household, and they were on the radio all the time. Anytime the radio was on, it didn't take long before you were hearing a Beatles song. In 1968, 69, 70, 71 in there, and John Lennon himself was, he was a poster on my sister's wall. And so was McCartney. He had his own poster, and
Yeah.
They were there. They were present. They were part of my life and part of a lot of people's lives that I knew,
Yeah. So what's weird for me, Doc, is, I was born in 59.
Right.
My dad, was in the Army. We moved around a lot. I spent a lot of time in Louisiana. And I remember, um, we did not listen to anything but the joke, right? Both kinds of music, country and Western growing up. The country radio was always on.
Right.
Maybe a little Fats Domino, Bobby Darin, but no rock and roll whatsoever.
Right.
And it wasn't till like the middle 70s before I got my own AM clock radio, would listen to it. So I remember, and I don't remember my age, but I remember going to Ohio at my dad's parents' house, and they had this huge front yard and a huge backyard, like kind of a mini farm. And I was talking to my cousins who all lived in Ohio, and they were shocked that I could not name all 4 Beatles.
Right.
I mean, I recognize the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the Beatles cartoon, but I don't, my biggest probably recording remembrance is we were a Southern Baptist household, and like
Right.
I had cousins that, the Beatles are devil because they say they're bigger than Jesus, and so I didn't become aware of the Beatles till in my teenage years, right? Like in the middle 70s and slowly hearing songs and getting to know them and hearing about this, Sergeant Pepper's and checking that out and going this. And
Sure.
So I came late to the Beatles, though certainly quickly began to love them. and in all the different phases. Um, do do you have some favorite songs? And was, I know that, right, like everyone had a favorite Beatle. And I remember once on this political show, right, like John Lennon is the right answer to who's supposed to be your favorite
Right.
Beatle. That is, the girls liked Paul,
Yep.
the quiet people like George, the goofy people liked Ringo, but the really intellectuals like John. Um, Talk a little bit more about your love of the music and exploring that.
Yeah, sure. And that's fascinating. You got to see the Beatles cartoon too. That's cool.
Yeah.
The yeah, the early Beatles, anytime at all, which I think John wrote. Not that
Yeah.
that matters too much, but a song like that, reached into me somehow and grabbed me, and I felt like, all I want to do, anytime at all you got to do is call and I'll be there. And
Yeah.
these are just words and sounds, and they sounded great together, and I think that drew me in, and the fact that my brother Joe and my sister Diane. I don't remember Frank being like a huge Beatles fan. Frank's the guy that introduced me to Bruce. I'm sure he was a Beatles fan, but just Joe and Diane were bigger Beatles fans as I remember. And so there's all that influence going on with me as a little kid. 'Cause I always talk about paying attention in my house from the carpet.
Yeah.
Everybody in the house was bigger than me.
Sure.
I'm from a tall family to begin with. My dad was 6'6", my brother Frank was 6'8", my brother Joe's 6'3". My sister's a tall gal, my mom was a tall gal. So I grew up in a house with a lot of height. So you're always looking up,
Yeah.
like from the carpet, and the things that were influential were the things that those folks liked. Also, the antithesis of liking the Beatles was my dad, who did not like the Beatles, and that was hippie music.
Yeah.
And that whole diatribe about, how, you want to hear good music, here, listen to Bing Crosby.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of dialogue that went on. And he wasn't wrong about Bing Crosby, but Bing Crosby wasn't the Beatles, and he wasn't the Beatles in 1969 and 1970 and 1971 when I was growing up. And so as far as the songs went, I guess, I was probably 3 or 4 when the White Album came out.
Yeah.
And that ended up being a big album, just a ton of songs. You could put it on and listen to one side, flip it over, and then you had a whole nother album to go to. So I really enjoyed the White Album. And they're just there. They're there today. I listened to Double Fantasy earlier today, and just to hear what he was doing then, right before the tragedy, and but and you saw him reaching back into his roots in that album, and
so one of my favorite stories, and this is one of those what could have been, is Paul was visiting John in New York, and they were watching Saturday Night Live, and they had the famous skit early where Lauren Michael offered $3,000 if the Beatles would come on Saturday Night Live. It's a classic skit. Like, it was like, if money's stopping you, I have it. Here's a check made out to $3,000 to the Beatle. If you don't want to give Ringo any of the same share, that's okay. And John and Paul gave serious thought to getting in a cab and driving to the studio because, it's Saturday Night Live. And it was just too late and they were too tired. And I think they both mentioned to possibly messed up to do that. But how freaking funny would that have been to have them show up?
Right. So yeah,
Yeah,
like they've never played. Like they're just getting back together with
yeah,
their guitars in their hands, just walking in
yeah.
to play. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then of course, then the follow up was George Harrison guest starred as a musical guest
Right.
once, and they had the scene where Lorne Michaels was like, "No, no, no, it was $3,000 for all four of you,"
Right.
and
Right.
um, so I want to hear about your memories of the unfortunate passing, but I'll share mine first.
Please do.
At this time, I was working at a trucking company as a dispatcher, and we were 24/7. We did oil field dispatching,
Okay.
so people hauling trucks, pipe, and people, a lot of hot shots where you would take a small part to a rig. And I worked 6 at night to 6 in the morning, and there was not a TV in my office. So you either read a book or you listened to the radio. And I remember around 5 in the morning, I turned on the radio, and it was Nova 104 was the FM station, and they were playing a Beatles song, and that was totally out of their. This is 1980, so this is totally out of their rotation.
Right.
They were playing Dan Fogelberg, and and just like maybe some early Springsteen, so just Led Zeppelin, everything, and all of a sudden I'm like, why are they playing a Beatles song?
Right.
And I dialed the radio station, and they answered, and I said, I haven't seen a TV. What's going on? And he said, John Lennon was shot last night. What? And back then there's no internet, there's no TV, there's no pull up Google to do a search, and I was just shocked. And then after fact, I found out that Monday Night Football had had broken it, with Howard Cosell, and that's a famous moment. So talk to me about how you found out John had been shot.
Yeah, do you mind if I give you a fairly long story?
I do not care at all. Please take it away.
Right. That's fine. Thank you. So go back to Thanksgiving of 1980. It's November 27th. We do an early Thanksgiving dinner at my house, and me and my brother Frank and his girlfriend at the time, Brooke, we have tickets for Springsteen in Madison Square Garden. So we head up on the train, and now we're heading. I'm a Philly guy. We're heading into enemy territory. We're heading to New York, and we're heading to the Madison Square
Absolutely.
Garden, home of the Knicks and the Rangers. And I'm a hoop head, and I'm gonna be walking into a building where Bill Bradley and Walt Frazier played, and Philly's own born and raised Earl the Pearl Monroe, Black Jesus. So there's that whole thing going on, and a guy out of Lubbock, Texas played there too, a guy by the name of Michael Ray Richardson. So we're heading in. We get up there. We walk. We go up the street level, and we go into the garden, and I'm kind of in awe of being there. And we get seated, and we're on Clarence's side of the stage, and we settle in. And Frank and I are talking about, everybody does it. The songs are going to expect to hear
right
during the Springsteen show,
sure.
Right? And now it's Thanksgiving, and so we're like, is he going to do Santa Claus is Coming to Town? So the concert starts, and it's a blast of a show, and it was just a lot of fun. It was great being up there with the New York audience, and I'm glad to have been there that night and many other times up there. They're a great audience, tremendous audience, and So, show's great, but encores are now going on, and there is no Santa Claus is coming to town. And I learned that night to not set myself up with expectations going into Bruce. Just go, idiot, and enjoy the damn show. It's going to be
Makes
great.
sense. Okay. Yes. Right.
Don't set yourself up for any kind of disappointment. And I try to pass that on to others. Because, there's a lot of people go, you think he's going to play Jungle Land tonight? You think he's going to play this or that? And I'm like, don't set yourself up. Don't do that to yourself. So lesson learned that night. Lesson learned. So no Santa Claus coming down. But back down to Philly, we have tickets, me and my brother Frank, and two guys he played college ball with, Paul McDade and Kenny Taylor. We have tickets for December 6th at the Spectrum. We go out to dinner before the show and have a nice time there at dinner, go into the show. Show's going on, another great show, of course. He breaks after Rosalita. Now he's going to come out for the encores. We see some little road crew stagehand action going on up on stage before they come back out. And they come back out, and what's he bring out? Santa Claus is coming to town. So unexpected, if we're not getting it on Thanksgiving, we're not going to get it on December 6th.
Right.
And sure enough, he breaks into Santa Claus is coming to town. The party's on, and
you're just thrilled, right?
There was two things about that show. Two audience members at that show that led to one of my favorite headlines I ever saw in an article about Springsteen. And the article was this. The headline in the article was this: the doc and a socker marvel about a rocker. And this was in the Philadelphia Bulletin. And what it was referring to is Dr. J was at the show that night.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we saw him too. He was sitting up in the press box. This is long before club seating in any place or anything. Sitting there in the press box. And then the soccer that they were talking about was a boxer, it was at one time the light heavyweight champion of the world, a fellow by the name of Mike Rossman.
Okay.
The kosher butcher, Mike Rossman. And he was a local guy from around here. I think he grew up in Turnersville, New Jersey. And so they were both there that night, and that article was about them. And I just thought it was a great headline. The doc and a soccer marvel about a rocker. And it was pretty cool. So that was December 6th. And at that time, I did not have a ticket for December 8th. But the night before the December 6th show, I ran into a fellow from my neighborhood by the name of Bobby Myers. He was a couple years older than me. And he knew I was a big Springsteen fan. He knew I was going to the December 6th show. And he was mentioning to me that he had a ticket for December 8th that he might not be able to go to. He had a couple older family members that were going, but he might not be able to go. So I get in touch with him on Sunday after the show just to see if maybe there's a chance he's not going. And finally, I reached out to him. I don't get a call back from him until about 9 o'clock Sunday night. Now, next day's a school day. I got basketball practice very early in the morning. Anyway, I make arrangements. He's not going to be able to go to the show. Make arrangements with Bobby. I go to Roman Catholic High School in Center City, Philadelphia, and he goes to West Catholic High School, which is situated in West Philadelphia. And so I have to go meet him at his school after my basketball practice. So I take the L up there, get the ticket off him, single ticket, and I have it for that night. I get a hold of my brother, Frank. I said, listen, I'm going to go to the concert from school. I'll stay at school and then head down to the show. I said, if you could pick me up after the show, that would be great. So sure enough, he's willing to do that. So sorry this story's so long.
No, you're good.
But it's December 8th, and down to the show I go. I am not going to know the people I'm with. This is my first experience going to a show alone, but I'm comfortable. I'm a city boy. I'm comfortable.
Sure.
Out and about, and I'm 15 at the time, And so I get situated. It's a nosebleed ticket towards the back of the arena, and I get there plenty early, and spark up a doobie and offer it to a couple that were sitting right behind me, and so we're having a little smoke and a little dialogue, and then you know the fever of when he's about to come on.
Right.
And back then,
That anticipation.
I don't know whether he still does this. I doubt he does because of the larger venues that he plays now. But back then, he would not take the stage until all tickets had been received out front.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily in your seat, but and they also used to have somebody go through the corridors saying, 5 minutes to show, 10 minutes, that kind of thing.
I did not know that. How interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm speaking for mostly the Spectrum at the time, but definitely he would not hit the stage until he knew everybody was in the arena anyway. And so you feel it coming on the show. You know it's coming, and then the relatives of Bobby show up and they get seated, and then here comes the band and Bruce and it's on and it's a great show. In particular, a song that stuck out to me that night, it stuck out to me as it was happening, and it came into play later on in my Springsteen stories. But he did a tremendous version that night of The Price You Pay. It was so good. It has stayed with me from that night on. And so, show goes on and the show ends. All shows start and all shows end. And now it's time for me to go meet my brother out front. So I'm standing out front of the Spectrum, and here comes my brother rolling up in the wheel. And I get in the car. And he says to me, "Did he say anything?" And I said, "About what?" And he goes, because Howard Cosell just came on Monday Night Football a little while ago and said John Lennon had been murdered. And the world stopped. The world stopped.
Wow.
I didn't know how to compute that. And my brother Frank just he didn't, he was in the same boat I was kind of, and we just we drove home, and I just remember the quietness of that drive home, and really not being able to compute what has just happened, and coming off of the great high of a Springsteen show, and then thinking about whether he knew or didn't know, because of course I have no way of knowing at that point whether he knew or not. And turns out that they waited till after the show to tell him. There was a horrible rumor that went around for years. It may still be floating around out there. It's a rumor. It's not a true thing, but was that he was singing Point Blank at the same time that the guy killed John Lennon.
Okay.
I'm not going to say his name.
Yeah.
But strictly a rumor. There's no truth to that whatsoever. But
an urban myth, so to speak.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. But yeah. So the world stopped, and the aftermath was far and wide. People that were my age, that were 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old people.
Yeah.
I seemed as devastated as the people who had really, really grown up with the Beatles too.
Sure.
It was felt worldwide. What a great loss in such a tragic way. And
yeah, it really was, and there is a I read a book earlier this year, What If the Beatles Had Stayed Together, which was a really interesting read
Do you know who that's by?
I can look it up and let you know.
Okay. Yeah.
It's it's an interesting premise that they they end. What keeps them together is in real life, they went on the Tonight Show. John and Paul, and Joe Gargiola was there being the guest host.
Okay.
And in this book, they say, well, the only reason we're going on the Tonight Show is to meet Johnny Carson. And if Johnny Carson isn't going to be there, we're not going to go.
Right.
And so in the book, Carson says, well, I'll go if you'll sing a song, because they were just going to be guests. And so they negotiate. And so he comes in, and the premise of the book is that they click right away.
Okay.
And Carson talks about him and Ed McMahon always being there for each other, and no matter how tough it got, they stayed there for each other.
Right.
And so the idea is that changed their life. And so no matter how mad Paul and George and John and Ringo got with each other, they stayed together. So I'll get you a link to the book. It's a very fascinating story.
It sounds real interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It is, and you think of things like, John would have been there for Live Aid. Either Band-Aid or We Are the World, one or the other.
Yeah.
He would have been involved in. And just also all the great music that we didn't get. And I do think he would have continued to work in his own way for a better society. I know that since his death, there has been a lot of things coming out that he is not a perfect man, and none of us are. But the legacy of his music has just stayed forever.
Yeah. It's with John. Like he was so involved in the anti-war movement.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you see stars getting involved in things, you're never sure what their agenda is coming out of the box.
Yeah.
It takes some time for them, to hit the proving ground that they're for real. But I going back and watching, him on the cab and a few other things over the years, his sincerity about that left no question that he was there because he cared about getting that war ended, and not a way to line his pockets, for one of the better phrase. He seemed to genuinely care that this earth that we live on, we as a people amongst each other need peace and not war. And we need to love and not hate. And he seemed to genuinely believe those things and want to carry that message. And you have to admire a guy like that, because he did not seem to be in it for the money at that point at all. I remember, like, when somebody looked like John looked in the in those anti-war years, the way I was raised, they were hippies,
Yeah, sure.
And there was a way that he spoke that broke through how you looked. What he said reverberated and made sense. It wasn't just a bunch of words strung together to try to sound pretty. He generally seemed to have a notion that we could, if we stop fighting each other, get together and make this world a better place.
Absolutely. You know, when you mentioned the story, I thought maybe you had been the night after when Bruce
No,
said this was a hard night to play. Um, and
no,
there
sir.
was, you know, where he opened with Born to Run and he did Twist and Shout. What's interesting, I think, to give us a Bruce connection, I had never seen this, or if I'd seen it, I'd forgotten that in one of his last interviews, Lennon was talking about how much he loved the river, in
Yeah,
particular, Hungry Heart.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
was his favorite song on the radio right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a Rolling Stone. Oh, if I remember, the guy who wrote it, Fred Schurers maybe, did a great piece with Bruce. Bruce is on the cover, looking like he's ice skating. He is
Yeah.
ice skating. It's that issue, and the title of the article is Bruce Springsteen and the secret to the world, and the secret of the world, something like that. And it's talked in there about that night.
Wow.
And there's actually a mistake in that article. He said he refers to Hungry Heart, and he refers to it as a number one single, which he never made.
Right. Exactly.
Number 5. But yeah, that's a really I'll tell you what, that the things Bruce talks about in that article are as resonant today as they were then, which is scary in one way that we haven't progressed a little better as a people.
Mm-hmm.
But the part where he talks about going, about the night Lennon was killed and coming out the next night. And then they had actually left the stage and came back up to play Twist and Shout.
Yeah.
That's if you're in that audience, you go into an absolute frenzy at that point. It's
absolutely.
It's a little penthouse.
I was there when the tour opened in Pittsburgh, and he after
What tour was this?
This is the 2016
God.
the River Tour, right? Yeah. And where David Bowie, he talked about David Bowie doing his
his
how much he helped, his covers and how much he helped. And we had all talked about what song do we think he would play to what song would he play, and and he did Rebel Rebel.
Right.
And it was very cool being there and hearing that.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Well, Doc, any final thoughts before I let you go?
I guess my final thought would be, since we're talking about John Lennon and of course a little bit about Bruce, they're two guys that wanted to see the world be a better place. And
yes.
I know from my perspective, and I try to do this in my own life, to treat people with respect, whether I agree with them or whether I don't, and to do my best, and hopefully anybody listening to do their best in just trying to make what we got going on a better thing with each other.
Amen.
I think both of those guys believe in those things. And I appreciate them passing that along.
I think well said, sir. I appreciate that. And I really, really appreciate you jumping on a second time just to talk a little bit about, John and his legacy. And I really appreciate it, my friend.
It's an honor, Jesse. It's a pleasure to be with you anytime. Maybe someday we'll get you up here to Philly for a show.
That's what we got to do. We got to do that. Oh, we want a show so bad.
Yeah.
All right. If someone wants to reach you, are you on any social media?
I don't do social media anymore. Got
okay,
off
that's right.
Years ago.
Well, you know what? That's probably a wise thing to do. So if you want to reach him, email me at setlustingbruce@gmail.com, and I'll get the message over to Doc.
Sounds great.
All right, I'm going to end with, because you mentioned this, now they've come so far and they've waited so long
Mm.
just to end up caught in a dream where everything goes wrong, where the dark of night holds back the light of day, and you got to stand and fight for the price you pay.
Fantastic.
Rest well,
Fantastic.
my friend.
Listen,
You
you
take,
take care, be safe, be well.
I will. And you, listener, be safe. Remember to social distance, wash your hands, wear a mask, be good to each other because we need to be. And for now, thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.